Hi there, I'm Elizabeth with Ellie's Handcrafted Jewelry, and welcome to my channel where I share tips, tricks, and tutorials for those looking to learn the art of wire wrapping and wire weaving. And today I'm going to be showing you how to create this Tree of Life pendant. It features a gemstone tree of life, so using those gemstone chips if you have them. If you don't, I'll leave a link below where you can find some of those. It's also featuring some cold forging techniques, so if you've been interested in learning more about that, I'll be showing you how to do that as well. So I'm going to show you how to create the frame, how to create the tree, and how to do all the swirly elements in between. While I have you here, I wanted to let you know that there are kits that are coming available on my website if you'd like to check those out. There are Christmas trees, snowmen, and the new mirror ring are all available in kits, as well as the Odessa cuff bracelet. So you can find that. The link is in the description below, or there's a little card here where you can find that. But before we get started, I'd like to thank Kazdance for sponsoring this video. Kazdance is a gem seller located in the United States and has a variety of high-quality stones. Search by gemstone, shape, size, quality, and more to find the perfect stone for your project. I've left a link in the description below to their website as well as their Facebook page so that you can stay up to date on any new arrivals or sales. Alright, so for tools and materials, you're going to need chain nose pliers, round nose pliers, flush cutters, a ruler. You're also going to need a chasing hammer and a steel bench block if you are wanting to do the cold forge option. If not, these are not required for this tutorial, but if you want to learn cold forging, I highly recommend having these. I'll leave a link in the description where I get these. You're also going to need some kind of dowel or something that's about 20 millimeters or 27 millimeters around. So a big dowel or maybe a pill bottle, whatever you have on hand. You're also going to need about 8 inches of 16 gauge wire for the frame. And then you'll need 18 gauge and 20 gauge that are both about 7 inches long, maybe longer. It depends on how much of a frilly frame you want to have. You'll also want about 20 segments of 26 gauge wire. These are about 7 inches long. And of course you're going to need gemstone chips. I'll leave links in the description below where you can get all of these materials. Now to get started, I'm going to go ahead and hammer the end of this 16 gauge wire. And you can see that it's a sharp end here, but that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and flatten it. I'm dropping the hammer and dragging as I go, so it should look like a J as I'm hammering. Until I have a paddled end. Now I'm just going to take it and use a file that I have over here just to file those down. You can also use sandpaper just so that these edges aren't so sharp. Just like so. Now I'm grabbing my round nose pliers and I'm just going to create a little loop at the end. It is going to be a little harder because this is hammered flat. So there's my little loop. And you don't have to do this step, but this just makes it give it a little bit more dimension. From there I'm going to stick it into the furthest side of my plier and create a loop going the opposite direction, back towards this loop like that. Just like so. Grabbing my bench block here, I'm going to hammer just this outside perimeter of the wire. So dropping and dragging. And you'll notice that I'm not using a lot of force, I'm just dropping the hammer on it and dragging. And that is enough to give it some dimension. At this point, I'm grabbing my dowel, or in this case, this is a dapper block here, and I'm just going to wrap this around. And it's okay if this is laying up against it. And you see I have plenty of excess wire here. I did that on purpose in case I wanted to create more swirls or a larger loop. And then I just rolled that back up like so. And so now I have a nice little curve. Set this back aside, and I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. Probably about there. So about 1/2 inch from this little loop. And I'm going to hammer this flat as well. So just laying it on my bench block. And then drop and drag. Until that has a paddled end. And then I'm grabbing my file again to file that so it's not so sharp. About like that. And now I'm going to create a swirl that is going to be going upward. And this wire is hard, so it's going to be a little bit harder to curl. And if you get to a point where you're like, oh, I really want that to be a little bit more curved inward, you can use your chain nose pliers or flat nose pliers to kind of bring that back in a little bit more. About like that. And I'm going to go ahead and continue curling. And it's going to sit over the top of the other loop about like that. Bring that down a little bit more. And now I'm going to grab my bench block again, and I'm going to hammer just the outside of the swirl. This is optional. And I'll lay it right there, and then gently around just the outside if I can. This is really good practice if you want to do cold forging, because this is going to help you get very accurate. So just dropping it around the outside. So there I have some dimension. Of course, that is the back side, so when we put it up here, it's going to look nice and smooth on this side. Oh, and we're still going to need that because we're going to go ahead and hammer around the frame. So you're going to want to hold these two things together so that way they don't stretch out everywhere. Place this on the bench block and just hammer around the outside of the frame. So now this is hammered a little bit more flat. This is going to make it more rigid. So it's going to be a little bit more of a sturdy frame for you to put your tree on. Now if you have some extra 26 gauge laying around, it's ideal to bring that through the loops like this. Oops. Right there. And then wrap it around the loop once, two, and then wrap it around a couple times. So that way this holds this together so that when you put your tree on, it doesn't go sliding everywhere or distort the shape of your frame. And now I'll just wrap this around this loop here. Scooch this all together a little bit with your chain nose pliers. And just trim off the excess and tuck them in. And now you have a frame for your tree to be attached to. Now here's an easy trick that I learned for my tree wire. So as you can see, I've been going back and forth, so that way I have plenty of wires. I'm doing 20 strands. So now I'm at 18, so 19 and 20, like that. And then you just trim off the end. So you have all your strands together, and you just clip the ends. And do the same on the other side. And that way you have a bunch of strands that are already cut, rather than trying to cut them all at once, or one at a time. You cut them all at once, and it makes it much easier to get your tree strands. Now what I'm going to do is feed them through my frame. I'm going to back this camera off a little bit so you can see more of what I'm doing, and bring this towards the middle. So make sure it's kind of like folded in half, and then you can see it's sitting bubbled, or sitting there. And then take the longer piece and feed it through so it's wrapped around basically once, like that. Grab another piece, do the same thing. So grabbing the ends, pulling it straight, so there's the middle, then bringing one through. About like that, and you know they're long enough when they can be brought across the frame, which these are plenty long. But sometimes you like to add some squigglies and things in your tree to give it a little bit more effect, so having a little bit extra wire is not a bad thing. So halfway, bring it through. Just like that. And we're just going to keep adding strands. So bring it through where they touch, pull down. There's the middle. Bring one of the strands through. And scoot them next to each other. And we're just going to do that until all of the strands are on the frame. Alright, so all my strands have been attached. Now it's time to make the tree, which is, I think, one of the funnest parts. And to do that, there's a couple things that you can do. If you want to create a simple tree, you can simply twist these together to create the trunk, and then bring it up, or bring it up and then twist. But if you look at this one has some more curly elements to it, so I'm going to show you how to do that. And the way that I did it, is you take segments of the wire, hold it down with your thumb, and then gently curve them around, like so. So there's a curve, there's a curvy one. And come over and grab the next segment of wire. So you can grab as many pieces as you want. You can make it thicker or thinner, it's up to you. Could have several little swirly loops or more. And I think I'll do the same thing with this one, but maybe a little lower if I can. Something like that. And then maybe this one and this one go the opposite direction. So split these up a little bit. So holding with my thumb, bringing these wires around. And if they scoot up and down the frame, that's okay. You can collect them back together. And separating all these wires again. And just going the same way, but a little lower maybe. And as you can see, you can get very creative with the trunks of these trees. That looks interesting, doesn't it? And at this point too, now with this tree, you can't really see it very well, but if you kind of look in here, I actually started braiding the tree rather than twisting it. So I braided segments together. So if we separate these into 3 sections, about like that. Start braiding. It also adds a little bit of a different element to the tree. Adds a different texture as well. And something like that. And now this is kind of fun. You can start bringing your pliers in, squishing things together. You can twist it, you can tell it to do all kinds of things. And now know this, your tree does not have to be perfect. No tree in the wild thinks I need to be perfect and have perfect branches or a perfect trunk. They are all very unique, so you just let it be what it's going to be and you'll be happy with it. Because it is what it is. You can see I'm bending this over and bending this up a little bit just to give it more of an organic shape. Now once I got the trunk kind of situated where I want it, I'm going to compress these against the frame a little bit, just so it holds it in place a little better. And now we can start creating branches that come off of our trunk here. So just kind of figure out where you want everything to go. Spreading your wires a little bit. And remember, you don't want to twist them too long because we want to put gemstone beads on the end. So this one you can see I left just a little bit around the perimeter, so I have plenty of room for my beads. So that's what I'm going to try and do with these as well. Alright, so at this point you can start twisting branches together. You can see I'm using my pliers, just grabbing a clump and twisting them together very gently. You don't actually need to apply a lot of pressure with your pliers as you're doing this, just enough so it's grabbing onto those branches. And just take your time. Enjoy the process. So far we have some defined branches, and you can even branch those out and create even smaller branches if you'd like. Again, just keeping in mind where your spacing is. And when you're twisting, try to twist the same direction as the branch. So if you're creating smaller branches, just continue twisting the same direction as this branch. Alright, so there's my tree with all of its branches. And now we can start loading up the trees with beads if you'd like, or the chips. But if you want, you can even add some more dimension prior to doing that, so you don't have to do it later. So I'm going to go ahead and do that a little bit. Alright, so there's our knotted up tree. I'm going to grab my gemstone chips and just bring them over here. I just have about a strand of them. Alright, so let's go ahead and start loading these up, and you'll just load up one branch at a time. So separating my branches. Starting with your lowest branch. And just string on your beads. You want to string on just enough to where it reaches the inside perimeter of the frame. So you might have to play with it a little bit because gemstones are different sizes. So once it reaches the perimeter of the frame, we're going to bring it in and around like that once. And then what I like to do, you can either wrap it all around the frame, but what I like to do with the beaded ones is bring them back through, up and over the strand that we wrapped. So like this, bringing it around right next to the bead, pulling it through and wrapping it around there one more time. This is just going to make this a little extra secure. Now we're going to trim it off, maybe just a tiny bit, and then tucking it in next to the bead. So that'll help hold that a lot better, and so you don't have to worry about them coming off of the frame. Now we're just going to load up the next one, do the same thing. So loading it up with gemstones. I don't really like that one, so we'll do a different one. And loading, loading another one until it reaches the outside perimeter of the frame, and doing the same thing. So I'm going to use my pliers, it'll help me a little bit. So bringing it through once, and bring it through again, up to the top, and then over and around the beaded strand. Bring it next to the bead, and back up, trimming it off, and tucking that in. And we're just going to do that all the way around. Now, one thing you are going to notice is that you have more branches than you do have room for gemstones, and that's okay. Because if you notice with trees, you'll notice some bare branches every now and then too. And what I like to do is, you'll see with this one, there are some wires that go over top of the gems, just to kind of indicate a bare branch, and it kind of adds a little bit more interest to the piece, I think. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this around. So just going over top of this gemstone, just so I have a place for this wire to go. And with this one, I'm not even going to bother to wrap it the same way I do the beads. I'm just going to wrap it 3 times. Have it wrapped about 3 times around the frame. Trim it off and then tuck it in. And maybe add some dimension to it as well. And adjust where it's positioned. But that way you'll have some places for some bare branches as well. And you can bring them either in front of or behind, and it'll just add a lot more interest to your piece. All right, here's the finished tree so far. We have the frame all done. We have the tree situated and in its happy place. And now we are going to go ahead and begin creating the outer frame here. So like with this example, we're going to hammer some of this and add some dimension to it. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. So the first step is I'm taking my 18 gauge wire and I'm basically going to fold it in half gently. So it creates a little curve, pulling, tugging down on it just a little bit. And I'm going to want it to fit just below the roots to kind of cover up the frame a little bit. And I think that's a pretty decent angle. I'm going to grab my bench block again and my hammer and hammer just this bottom part here. About like that. And if you want, you can flip it over and use this side, but I kind of like a little bit of dimension in it. Figure out where it's going to sit. And then I'm going to bend the wire, and if you want, you can actually mark with a Sharpie, which is what I'm going to do. Right at the points here, just outside of the root system. Put that back on. Set that down. And I'm going to bend those right at that mark, so just to the right side of it and bend. I'll bend right at the mark. Do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm going to straighten these out so I can feed it through. So feeding it through just the outside of the frame, just like that. And I'm going to hold this in place and bring that wire up. And do the same on the opposite side, holding it down with my thumb best I can and bringing this up like so. And at this point you can kind of get creative with what you want to do. So in my case, I am going to curve this out like this, and then curve this upward, maybe like that. Kind of play with this side as well. You can add swirls as well, but I'm going to try and keep this one a little bit more simple. So I have some parts here, you can see I have some curves going on, and I'm going to actually bend that a little bit further and then up. You can use your pliers as needed. So in this case, I do like where this is going over here, so I'm going to pull this out where it's hanging out a little bit, set it down on my bench block, and hammer just the outside portion. Bend that back up. See how the dimension is? And then I'm going to curve this like so. Create a little loop, just a tiny little loop. And then I think I'll create a swirl up here that'll meet on top. So I'm gonna trim that, leaving probably, oops, about 1/2 inch from the curve. What I'm going to do is pull this out again, and I'm going to hammer this flat, paddled in, kind of like what we did when we started. Grab our file and file that so it's not so sharp. And then grab my round nose pliers, move this out of the way so you can see better, and curve this into a swirl. And you can adjust the swirl as you need. You can hammer it as well if you want to add more dimension, which I think I will do. Something like that. And now we got to work on this side as well. So just trying to figure out what I'm wanting to do here. I actually think I'll create a swirl that goes inward. So before I do that, I'm just going to hammer just this bottom portion right here. Like that, and then create a curve. And just curving upward. I think what I'll do is I'll actually make this a little shorter. So I'm going to cut this off, hammer this flat just like I did. Use my file to sharpen or soften the ends. Move that out of the way for a minute. Grab my round nose pliers and create another swirl. Oops. You can pull this forward, add more dimension to your swirl. So now you got a couple swirls around the outside perimeter of the tree. From here, we can grab our remaining wire. Now this is getting pulled out a little bit, so you want to make sure that everything is flat against the frame. And I'm going to do kind of the same thing that I did with the 18 gauge wire and creating a little bubble at the bottom, curving it just slightly, because this is going to go underneath. So you can see I'm feeding it through the top, same spot, but it's going to sit right underneath the hammered portion. About like that. Holding it down with your thumb and bringing it up to follow along. This kind of you can get really clever with. So like see here, I could go underneath. Then over top. Maybe creating a swirl. And back under. If I can get it back under. And over the top. Kind of like that. And I can tuck that in back there and actually hold most of this loop down. And do something clever and fun over here too, I guess. So curving it down, maybe adding a swirl down here. Just a very light one. And maybe following up. Like so. And over. Maybe through the center. Pulling gently. Don't want to pull too hard because I don't want to break any of my gemstones. I could even create another swirl right here if I wanted to. Before I do that though, I'm going to tuck this in. Oops. Bring it through. Force it towards the back. Like that. I'm going to hammer this one here. And file the end. And then curl the end with my round nose pliers. I'm just adjusting it at this point. And now I'm going to need to attach this as well, so you can use some leftover wire if you have it. Which I have lots of leftover 16 gauge wire, so I'm just going to stick that through here. Bring it around. Feed this through. And then just wrap that around the frame best you can. trim off the wire. And do the same with the opposite one. Feeding it through, back through the loop, so I can wrap it around the frame. Trimming off the excess and trimming it, or tucking it back into the back. Then you can really experiment with your frames. This one's a little bit different than this one, and they look really cool either way, however you do it. You can even coil some of the 20 gauge wire with 28 gauge or 26 gauge to add coiled bits as well. There's a lot of different textures that you can add to it, but this is the finished piece. You can also add a jump ring if you would like. I'll show you how to do that really quick. If you have bail making pliers, these are really great for this. And this just has tool magic on it, so it doesn't scratch up my wire so much. And I'm just doing the very smallest one. Wrapping it around like so until I have one little ring. Then you just trim off, making sure the flat side of your pliers facing one direction. Trim off, make sure flat side is facing the other direction. So that way they're nice and flush. And you just open it by spreading it like that. And then feeding on your piece. And then I'll use my flat nose pliers that I have here to kind of help me close that loop. Just kind of back and forth until they touch. Do a quick little closing like that. And there's your finished piece. And here it is with patina. I kind of wanted to show you the difference. It really brings out the texture of the tree trunk as well as the branches. It really brings them out. And you can see like the branches over top of the gems, and it just looks really, really pretty. So I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like from bare wire versus patinaed wire. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions at all, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below as I try to get them as quickly as I can. You're also welcome to join the Learn to Weave newsletter, which is available to those that are wanting to learn more and have tips, tutorials, and blogs sent right to your inbox, so you'll never miss out on anything new that's going on. You're also welcome to check out all the tutorials that are currently available on my website. There are a few of them that are still on sale, so you can check that out. Links are in the description below. Again, just a reminder, there are now kits available that you can gift away for Christmas or make for yourself, or create something with the kit to give for Christmas. And until next time, happy weaving!